Hello, welcome to the Fifth Star. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Albert.
And this is a podcast where we're trying to find our next 5-star movie. And when we find it and agree on it, this podcast will join a motorcycle gang, run away from the law, and crash and burn.
Vroom vroom. So on this episode of The Fifth Star, we're going to be reviewing The Bikeriders, directed by Jeff Nichols. It is about pretty much a true story about a 1960s era of a motorcycle gang. And we wrote down what we rated this movie secretly, and we're going to guess that, Jamie, I'm going to guess that you gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Okay. I'm so torn because I know you either hated it or loved it. I don't think you'd be in the middle. Maybe you would though. Crap. This is like one of those, it's got a lot of action, but also... Okay, I'm just going to settle at 3.0.
3.0.
I feel like it's a bit of a cop-out, but I always feel like it's a cop-out when I guess that you gave it a 3.0.
I mean, yeah, the odds are in your favor. So we'll go into our spoiler-free thoughts first, and then we'll reveal our scores. So this movie stars a pretty decent cast. You got Austin Butler, who plays Benny. You got Tom Hardy, Michael Shannon, Jodie Comer. So I remember her in movies like Free Guy, but I don't think she's like a really recognizable person yet. But she's in this, and then you also have Michael Feist from Challengers. So yeah, pretty solid cast. What did you think of The Bikeriders?
I thought this movie was for the boys.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's about a bunch of boys riding bikes.
Which, like, I don't always... I mean, I like boy movies. A lot of my top movies are considered boy movies, I would say.
You didn't like the movie.
But I thought it was kind of boring.
I think I'm wrong with my 3.5.
I thought it was kind of boring. I did not... I mean, pretty much all the violent scenes I looked away because I cannot really do gore or whatever. Mm-hmm. So if you're sensitive to violence, then you may want to watch this where you have control over the remote.
But there's not a lot of it. It's not a very action-heavy movie. It's more
gratuitous. Drama. Yeah.
It's just there's certain parts where there's violence.
Right. I also didn't really see the point, which we can get into more with the spoilers.
Okay.
But what did you think?
So, I mean, yes, it is a boy movie. So I did like it. I did really like it, actually.
Okay, wow, then I'm wrong.
Yeah, and maybe it's because I am a boy, and maybe it's because I have ridden a motorcycle once.
Okay, you calling yourself a boy is too funny.
I am. I'm a big boy. But, I understand the appeal of the motorcycle, of being on a motorcycle, just being part of a group of dudes who likes riding and riding together.
Yeah.
Like I haven't
fighting.
Yeah, like I haven't done that, but like I get it. And I think that part of it, I was able to see the appeal and understand the appeal. I also thought that it was just really well directed, really well acted.
Yeah.
Well written. Man, I don't know.
I definitely think it was shot really well.
Yeah.
The cinematography was quite pretty to look at.
Yeah, it was. I agree. And it has that nostalgic thing because it takes place in the 60s and 70s. And they do a great job with the production design, the costumes, and all of that kind of stuff. But as much as it is really, quote unquote, a boy movie, the whole thing is being narrated and being told from the perspective of a woman.
Right, which I thought was interesting.
I thought that was really well done.
But I did kind of feel like it was still heavily written by a guy. I don't know. I could never relate to her as a character. Mm-hmm. There was something kind of missing from her character for me to be able to really relate or connect. I just felt like she was a little flat. So
interesting.
That's unfortunate.
I mean, I thought Jodie Comer did a great job. She shows you this thing that she's stuck between, where she really loves the Austin Butler character and is drawn to him, but she also knows he's probably not the kind of guy she should be drawn to or should try to settle down with.
Yeah.
But she can't help it in a way. And, once they're in a really committed relationship, she really can't just leave either. So there's a lot of that tension, just as their story unfolds. And this whole movie is based off of, or
A
it
book?
tells you in the beginning, yeah, it's inspired by a photojournal book that was released in 1967 by Danny Lyon, where this photojournalist, he basically spent years of his life, I think it was like 3 or 4 years, with the Outlaws, which is the actual like group that the Vandals in the movie are like based off of. And he became like a member of the group and all this kind of
Mm.
stuff, and took all these like great photos. But he also, like they show in the movie, recorded all these interviews. And
Right. So Mike Feist
Feist, yeah.
plays him.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
which fun
so-
fact, I didn't know Mike Feist was in this movie,
Yeah.
but I was just in New York and I swear, first time ever seeing a Celebrity in the Wild, and I saw him running out of the subway into the rain, and I am like, I'll just say, I'm like 100% certain it was him.
Wow. That's cool.
First time ever seeing Celebrity in the Wild. I mean, we were coming out onto the, Broadway Times Square stop. So he used to be on Broadway. He probably lives around there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
That
don't
makes
think
sense.
it's totally unreasonable that was him.
No, I mean, in New York, that's the cool thing about New York. Celebrities could just be walking
You
around.
just see him.
And
Yeah. And I've never experienced that other than like having to pay to see a celebrity. That's the only time.
you got your money's worth. You got
I
to see
didn't
a
have to pay
celebrity
to
for
see a
free.
celebrity this time.
So did he see you looking at him, like recognizing him?
No, we did not make eye contact, thankfully, but
Okay.
because I was staring at him for maybe a little too long, because I was like, "Is it him?
He probably
him?
felt it in the
Is
back
that him?"
of
And
his
then I
head.
kind of like looked away to act casual, and then I looked at him again. I was like, "I know he's wearing a hat, but that is him. That
Yeah.
face is very recognizable."
I mean, because I think
anyway,
Mike Feist is at that level where he can probably walk around and most people wouldn't recognize him.
yeah, he's like nearing stardom,
Yeah.
but he's not quite there.
But he did star in the Challengers last year, which was
Right.
really well
Really big.
received. Yeah, and people.
He
like,
was
a
in
lot of
West Side
people saw it.
Story.
Yeah,
Steven
which I didn't see that,
Spielberg's.
but I thought he was great in Challengers.
Hmm.
And in this movie, he's like kind of a bit character, but it is
Yeah.
based off the real guy who was the interviewer.
And I thought the interview scenes were interesting. Like the way that they were kind of woven into the narrative.
Hmm.
It was definitely helpful because I think without those interviews, it would have been harder to follow kind of what was going on.
Yeah.
My favorite scenes were with her,
Hmm.
but I still had a difficult time kind of connecting with her, I guess.
So, according to Jeff Nichols, the director, he first kind of became aware of this like 20 years ago when he saw like a reprinted version of this photo book that got re-released. And in that re-release, Danny Lyon, the kind of photojournalist, like followed up and wrote an epilogue on where these people are now.
Wow.
So that's kind of, you see a little bit of that in the movie too, where, that's kind of baked into the story. It's really just like a bunch of photos and then excerpts of these interviews that are just like written down. And so the Kathy character, she's a real person. Some people I heard like didn't really like her accent and all that kind of stuff. Like the accent does sound a little silly. They're in the Midwest, but that's based off of like Jodie Comer is replicating like the actual accent of the real Kathy on the audio recordings that they still have right now. When the writer, like he was kind of going through the book, he said like she was the most compelling person that he was drawn to. And so the whole kind of opening part of the movie where she's talking about how they met, and there's a really funny scene right at the beginning where she has a boyfriend.
Mhm.
But then the first time she kind of meets Austin Butler, like he just camps out in front of the house, and then the boyfriend is just like, doesn't confront him, is just like scared of him, but doesn't know what to do, goes to work, comes back, and then just is like, I'm done with this, and he just like leaves.
That was so weird.
Yeah, it was so weird. It's like, what? You're just gonna leave? You're not even
Yeah.
gonna confront this random guy who's like stalking your girlfriend right outside your house? But that's apparently all true. Like that's just straight lifted from this interview excerpt that was in this book.
Weird. Okay.
So-
I thought that was like one of the weirdest parts because I just
Really?
didn't get it. I was like, wait, was this like the last straw situation where the boyfriend was like, that's the last straw.
Yeah.
You've done this too many times. And I was like, I don't get it. Like,
It
what
does
is
seem
he
like a really big
thinking?
overreaction.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what he's really thinking. I
Yeah.
don't.
But then the Kathy character is also kind of like meh. Okay, well, I'm kind of interested in this new guy anyway, so
Yeah,
she
it's true.
doesn't seem like that torn up about it. I thought that scene was kind of interesting because the story is told from the perspective primarily of a female. This whole idea of like, okay, so she's with this guy, and it comes out at different points throughout the movie, but the difference of certain men who are like more like squares, I guess, pinkos as they call it at one point, but guys who go to college and wear tennis shorts and stuff like that versus like the bad boy who rides a Harley, right?
Yeah.
And so even when I was in high school, I remember being like, what is this thing that like I always keep hearing like bad, girls like bad boys and stuff like that, and nice guys finish last and all this kind of stuff. And I was definitely like one of the nice guys. And so
Really?
so I wasn't like a troublemaker. I wasn't part of a gang or whatever, but I had like friends who were more like
Edgy.
yeah, and the girls were generally always did get more of the
It's
attention.
not about the badness. I think it's all about confidence.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But
The
then
nice guys maybe don't appear as confident.
yes, and I think later in life I kind of figured that maybe that's it.
Yeah.
But then the movie also at one point addresses this idea of like change, like women who like to try to change a man and like redeem a man. So not only are you drawn to the confidence, but the fact that he's bad is more of like, is it a challenge? Is it like
I could see that.
I can make my mark and domesticate this wild beast? Is that the thing? Because the movie does play with that. It's
There is like
you have the Benny character who is like untamable in a way, and
I do think there's an appeal in women that they want to be able to take care of something that is difficult to take care of because it's more of a challenge.
Interesting.
I could see that. Like, and then definitely being able to say like, oh wow, this person used to be this way, but look at them now. Like, look how they have grown. And
is that indicative of like the fact that because he loves me that much, it's like proof of his love that he was willing to change for me, and
I could see that.
That makes you feel
it's like more romantic that way. That makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, this is kind of a love story, which is only part of the movie. Very much is about these kinds of themes. Like that's what she's struggling with, and in conflict with the Austin Butler character because he's like resisting that, right? And the journey of their kind of relationship kind of deals with that tension. It's based on what really happened, it seems, to some degree. So like the Benny character in the book, there is a real Benny character. But what was interesting when I kind of listened to the backstory is that he appears in a couple photographs, but you never see his face in the photographs. So when this director like was initially like looking through these books and was really drawn to this, he was always had this kind of mythical picture of Benny because like you never see his face and you just hear like Kathy talking about him and other people talking about him. And then later when he got into actually making the movie, he got in touch with Danny Lyon, the photojournalist, and saw like the actual negatives and raw footage that wasn't put in the book and saw like an actual picture of Benny.
Gotcha.
And then was like, oh, that's not the way Benny looks in my head, Like it just made him like too normal compared to like what he had built him up to be. And then he said, what Benny looks like in my head is Austin Butler. So that's why he went and tried to cast Austin Butler in that role.
Funny.
Yeah. So it's this like hyper, like charismatic kind of embodiment of masculinity, that kind of thing. In actuality, he was just the guy, right? But I'm sure he still had that charisma that drew different people to him. Yeah. I think there's also an interesting like parallel between her being drawn to someone who she probably knows isn't right for her and is kind of dangerous of a situation to like what draws men to motorcycles, and the movie also does show like with
Hmm.
motorcycles, like how much danger there is. Like I have a high school friend who was riding a motorcycle and he got T-boned and almost died, like, and I think it's something that I heard him mention, the director. So I think it's very much intentional that it's mirroring, like, what is it about this kind of culture of motorcycles that draws men to it, even at the risk of like their own life. And there are interesting things like of yeah, like I personally, for me, I prefer like driving a car really fast than wanting to like be on a motorcycle and go really fast. But a motorcycle, there is something more like liberating and
Yeah.
freeing, because like in a car you're very much like staying in the lanes, but on a motorcycle, like, you can kind of do whatever you want. You can outrun a cop, like there's like, in a way, there's like nothing that limits you other than your own fear of like speed, right?
Hmm.
And there's something to that I think draws certain people, especially some guys, to that kind of fantasy or that kind of feeling, I guess. And I think like in the movie there, you're seeing people who kind of have that, but then you get into the whole like subculture of the motorcycle club where they're drawn to each other because of like a sense of belonging and control and power also, right? Because one thing that I thought the movie did really well was they do show glimpses of like these guys in their like real life.
These guys.
Yeah. In their real life, and you see like they are longing for some sense of power or control that they don't have in their regular life, which is why they are drawn to this kind of alternate world that they create for themselves, right?
I do think it is power. Like, I think there is this sense of power that you probably get from being able to drive a motorcycle really, really fast.
Yeah.
Something I've never been able to relate to.
Yeah. Have you ever ridden on a motorcycle, even on the
Yeah.
back? Oh, okay. Have you ridden your own motorcycle?
I've driven like a motorbike.
Okay.
Not the same, but
Like a moped style?
it's like a bit bigger than a moped. It's like a
Oh.
cross between a motorcycle and a moped,
Oh.
is what I would say.
Okay.
And it's fine, but it's not something I like have ever craved. Like, oh, I just want to ride it all the time.
Yeah.
I've never been that type of person, but
And like the whole thing of, have you ever like been on a road trip and then had a group of bikers like drive by or something like
oh
that?
yeah, they're so annoying.
But
They're the worst.
but it is intimidating because like, especially if you're in a group of Harleys, like it is really loud. And
That's why I get scared.
yeah. And there's like that sense of power too, right? Like not just you by yourself on a bike, but in the group, in the herd.
Uh-huh.
And you feel kind of like invincible,
Yeah.
and you just like own the road, and everyone has to like cater and work around you guys, like kind of thing. And it's loud. I think the movie, like even with the sound design, like did a great job with that, with like just the sounds of all the bikes. And I really thought the movie did such a good job of capturing that culture, that subculture, and then the psychology of what because there's a good ensemble cast too, like what draws them into that world, and kind of the good and the bad of it too,
Hmm.
because it starts off as like a certain type of thing,
Yeah.
and then it kind of evolves into something else, even though not everyone wants it to become that thing, right? And I think that's
It's a wild animal.
yeah. And it's interesting because like the Outlaws, they're the oldest motorcycle club in America, in the whole world. Like they started actually in the 30s, and then kind of went in and out of like active organization or whatever, and then like in the 60s around this time like really start to expand. And they're the third largest in the world. Like they have like over 3,000 members in like 43 countries. And
Dang. That's
yeah,
crazy.
and they're the third largest behind like Hell's Angels and the Banditos. And but they're also like listed on criminal lists and like, or law enforcement and all this kind of stuff, because it has become something much darker,
Yeah.
and more insidious. And like apparently there's like still a continuing feud between like Hell's Angels and the Outlaws that still continues to this day, like where
Hmm.
they'll just kill each other like in broad daylight. just because they're on their territory. I mean, it's just a straight up gang.
Yeah.
So, I think the movie does a good job of like showing kind of what it started as and then starts to show you like what it eventually becomes without, unpacking all of what it is now. One question I had, which I think was a bit divisive for some people, was what did you think of Tom Hardy and particular his like voice for his character?
Very Chicago. It was a good accent, I thought.
Oh, okay. I mean, you grew up, so the original Motorcycle
Chicago.
Club did start in the suburbs of Chicago.
And they are nasally
Yeah.
like that.
Okay, so you thought it was actually like a realistic
But it was
accent.
weird because I was like, I'm so used to his voice being, lower
Yeah.
and more masculine.
Mm.
So him kind of choosing like that higher register was at first a little comedic.
Yeah.
Did make him feel less intimidating, but then by the end I wasn't thinking about it anymore.
Yeah. Because when he first opened his mouth, I was like, what the heck is this?
But also you expect Tom Hardy's normal voice, so.
Yeah. I mean, he does do a lot of different like Bane voice, but like apparently he showed up on set without the director having heard what he was going to do, but just having heard kind of what he was thinking in terms of his character. And then he starts talking like this, and you see this quick scene of Tom Hardy's character watching The Wild One starring Marlon Brando. Yeah, from 1953. And that's kind of like the genesis, according to the movie's telling, of the starting this, group, right? For fun. And so,
which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
I definitely kind of giggled at that part.
Okay. But I think what he's doing is Tom Hardy's intention was that really he's playing a part.
Yeah.
He's
100%.
wanting to
copycat.
Yeah, be Marlon Brando. He's wanting to be a gangster.
Yeah.
And so that's why his voice is so like kind of a performative type of thing. It's not like a natural voice.
That makes sense. I watched an interview with the guy who directed Triangle of Sadness, and he was talking about how we imitate movies, and it's gotten to a point where now the way we imitate movies has sort of become real life. And it's sort of this weird cycle of, but his example was the way that people shoot. Like, nobody shot sideways until the movie came out. I can't remember which movie it was, where they shot sideways in the movie, and then suddenly people were like, dude, that looks so cool.
Yeah.
And then it became like a thing. And it's the worst way to shoot.
It is the most inaccurate way to shoot.
The worst way to shoot.
Yeah.
So it's like literally just for the look or the vibe.
Yeah.
And so when he's like watching that scene with Marlon Brando, I was like, wow, this is peak example of somebody just kind of being a fan of something and then deciding to adopt it into their life.
Yeah. And I think the beginning of the way it starts, it does seem pure. Like, even though these guys are like, they'll get into a fight. There's like a funny scene where they'll get into a fight with some quote unquote rivals, like a fist fight. And then they'll just like sit around having beers together afterwards and talking about like chopping up their bikes, And so it's really just like this love for motorcycles that just draws these guys together.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it does kind of get out of control. But as I was listening to Tom Hardy, and I just kept thinking, this is Goodfellas meets like Godfather. I was picturing like, and even though Godfather came out after, past when this story takes place, I think still like you have that idea of like the gangster, but even like the way it starts, the movie stylistically is very like Goodfellas. Even like some of the intense violence, when there is violence, the narration voiceover, like instead of Ray Liotta, it's Jodie Comer, from a female voiceover. Yeah, like I really liked those kind of stylistic nods to, I think, that world. It just takes place in the subculture of a biker gang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or biker club. Do you want to reveal what our scores are?
Sure. So you thought 3.5.
I'm guessing 2.5.
Yep.
Yeah.
2.5.
Okay. You guessed 3.0. And I was 4.0.
4.0.
Yeah.
Wow, we were both a whole point off each other. We lost our streak.
Man.
Oh, man.
Okay, so why did you really like not like this movie then? Okay, we're getting
I
to spoilers
thought,
now, right?
yeah,
So full spoilers alert.
I thought about giving it a 3, but then I just realized I didn't like it, so I have to go lower than a 3.
Okay.
I wanted to quit the whole time.
Oh,
I
just
was like,
because.
if I was watching this on my own, I would have DNF'd it like pretty early on, I think.
Okay.
Because we're different that way, because I know you finish basically every movie you watch.
You have to finish a
Right.
movie because
And so I was like,
you
well,
have to
we're doing this
see
for the podcast.
the whole thing in its context.
So
Yeah.
I gotta finish it.
I
And so,
appreciate that you
yeah.
did not DNF.
So I made my way through it, but it was, yeah, I did think it was kind of boring basically the whole time. I couldn't really connect with anybody. The content was very like something I'm not interested in.
Yeah.
Like
But
I'm not the target audience.
Even the
for this
wife
movie.
character, you didn't feel for her at all?
My favorite scene, so now we can get into yeah. So my favorite scene was after he gets his foot broken, which by the way, I thought he was so dumb because the opening scene, he gets beat up because he won't take his jacket off, and I was like, this is dumb.
But it's a point of like pride, right? This is your tribe. Like
I know, but I hate that trope. I think it's stupid. So
it's not even a trope. It's a real thing in life where
he gets
people
his foot broken because he won't take his jacket off.
People are willing to die for these kinds of things.
Which is foolish. That is called being foolish. Anyway. So then
martyrs are heroes?
Well, religion's different. But anyway. So then he broke his foot and they're having that like conversation and she's basically asking him to quit and he's like, I can't quit, or like, I'm gonna leave because I don't want to worry you. And I thought that scene was like really well done.
Yeah.
And I really liked that scene. I actually was like being pulled in a little bit for that part. And then I also felt pulled in when she demands Johnny let him go.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know that this scene's not going to really change anything, but I appreciated it.
Yeah.
But the rest of the movie, I don't know. I think the main thing that I was irritated by was the story was kind of told in almost a montagey way.
Yeah.
And skipped over a ton of what I thought were really important moments. For example, she's like, oh yeah, we met. 5 weeks later, we were married. And I'm like, wait, but we didn't get to like see any of that.
Yeah.
So I wasn't invested in their relationship like at all because we basically skipped over their entire relationship, which it wasn't like totally necessary, but I felt like by the end, if you really wanted me to connect with them as a couple, like you should have established that more or better. Because by the end, I realized, oh, I guess the movie was about them the whole time, but I couldn't tell. I was like, it felt like the main character was the motorcycle club, and she was just a side character.
Yeah.
Even though she was the narrator. I just felt like she was kind of like a side character, kind of filling in gaps for the audience. And so I never really felt like she was important until the end. And then I was like, okay, wait. Why didn't we, like, unpack that more?
Yeah.
Or better? I don't know.
I do agree with that. I think the one issue I had with this movie, which is why I wasn't higher on it, I almost was at a 4.5, was that I think this is very much like the book, like the photo book, a montage or a collage of different characters.
Yeah.
And less like one pure protagonist that you're kind of following straight through. Because it starts off with it being Kathy. And then at one point, it becomes really Austin Butler's story.
Yeah, Benny.
Because what the best part of the movie to me was when he was being stuck in this conflict between his relationship with Kathy, who ultimately wants what's best for him and to not put himself in harm's way and all this kind of stuff. But also the Tom Hardy character who's like, I am going to hand,
Johnny.
this club over to you. You're going to be the next in line. And want something so they both want something from him, and his whole thing is like, I've gone through life never asking for anything from anyone and never wanting anything from anyone, right?
Nothing from nobody.
Yeah. And then but that therein lied the tension, and that's why the scene I think with Kathy confronting Johnny works so much.
Yeah.
But the problem is that after all that gets set up, Benny just disappears from the movie.
Yeah.
He never has to actually make the hard choice of like picking between the two, or,
And
I
none of the
thought,
characters really change that much.
yeah. Now and then it becomes Tom Hardy's movie. I
Yeah.
think like Tom Hardy becomes the main character, and then it's really about like this conflict that he has of trying to hold on to like what he started the club for.
Trying to tame the gang.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then all the young guys who are coming in and causing all this havoc and trying to take it in a different direction. Even the final like climax conflict is between Tom Hardy and this new kid, not Benny. Like Benny's nowhere to be found in the story. So I do think that part it just it kind of like drops the ball there. But I thought Tom Hardy was still so interesting as a character. Like the whole time I felt on edge with like what's he gonna do? Is he gonna like flip out and just suddenly kill someone, or is he gonna like just let it slide? Like he kind of had both sides to him, and you never know which side was gonna come out. And so it was still like very engaging. And I understood that ultimately, like to your point, I think you're right. Ultimately, the main character is the club itself, the whole subculture itself.
Yeah.
And it's being shown and depicted through these different facets of these different characters.
But I kind of feel like the only person who ends up changing, at least throughout the story, is Kathy. I know
Okay,
Benny changes like right at the very, very, very end.
Yeah.
But like it's a really I didn't totally understand that. Like, yeah, Johnny gets killed.
Yeah.
And then Benny's like, I don't need to ride a motorcycle anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, was Johnny the only reason he was riding a motorcycle?
No,
That was a little confusing for me.
so
Maybe I missed something.
I love the ending because I thought that's what really just like brought it all together. Otherwise, it would have felt very flat. Like, oh, we've just seen these people and no one changes, and it's just
Could
it is
you
what
explain
it is.
it to me?
Okay.
Because I'm confused.
So to me, it was Austin Butler just loves the feeling of being on a bike. We don't know his whole backstory, but it seems to me like he just doesn't have a family. Maybe he's a foster kid or whatever. He clearly doesn't have a relationship with his family. So he's just like off on his own. And then with Johnny becomes like the father he never had, right? He's like that father figure who like takes him in under his wing, and all this stuff. And he finds a home with this family, the one that he never had. But then when everything essentially like explodes in their face, like he leaves. And then when he comes back, or when he finds out that Johnny died, this is a character maybe I identify because this character also just like cannot cry, right? He said like Kathy says the only time, even when his father died, like he didn't cry. The only time he almost cried was like when
they were gonna chop his foot off.
Yeah,
maybe.
when they thought he was gonna be able to ride again, right? And then when Johnny dies, you finally see him like really break down. So I think what happened was he realizes, man, like I love to ride, but it comes with so much baggage, and ultimately, like I lost one of the only two people I've ever really cared about because of this whole like culture that's built up around this riding. So, and then he kind of settles down, right? He starts working like a normal job, doesn't ride. And then he's like sitting out there on the porch or in his backyard. And then he hears like the sound of like the motorcycles in the distance. And then he like looks off longingly. And in that moment, I think there's a genuine like nostalgia, but also real like longing for, man, I miss it. I want to get back on the bike, right? But then he looks over at the window where, Kathy's looking like kind of at him and smiling, and he looks at her and he smiles. And to me, it's like, it finally happened. Like the person that really mattered, like, yes, he loves riding his bike and all this kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, Kathy wins. She gets to have a life with this guy because he's willing to give up the thing that he like loved because he loves her even more, right? And so he chooses to like resist the temptation of like the sounds of the motorcycle calling him in this distance, and remembers like, no, but like I'm happy now. I'm happy being with my wife, right? And so I thought it was such a beautiful, like hopeful, optimistic ending, and it's like he grew. Like the thing that you never thought, like the one character who seemed like he had the least potential to grow, like he finally did, and that.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was beautiful. I really liked that ending a lot. It made it
Interesting.
more meaningful.
Yeah, I guess like maybe because his backstory was so vague, it was like hard for me to connect all those dots.
Hmm.
And even then, like as you're explaining it, I'm like, I still feel like a lot of that is conjecture. But
I don't
like,
know. I think it's there. I think it's all there. It's just not explicitly stated. I mean,
it's more
in the
so,
looks that they give each other, and the sequence of sounds and reactions.
yeah.
Like, do you think in the end it's a hopeful ending or just ambiguous ending, or is it like a sad ending? Is it a tragedy? How did you read the ending or feel at the end?
I don't know. I felt like I felt like
It was just too ambiguous that you didn't know what to
maybe
take
to
away.
me the message just wasn't coming through.
Mm,
It felt like very
okay.
unclear where I was kind of like what's the point? But I guess you tying in the whole like motorcycles being like wild and him being wild
Hmm.
and then the woman wanting to tame him and then him eventually taming his desire, I
His like
guess.
inner demons in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like him taming his
His past maybe, which
maybe,
maybe
which like if they had gone into his past, that would
yeah.
have been I think more powerful.
Hmm.
Um
I mean,
if that's what they're going
you know,
for.
so
But
like the young kid who wants to join, who ends up like ultimately killing Johnny, like they show his past, right? And how
oh yeah,
dysfunctional.
that was probably the most disturbing scene
Yeah.
to watch.
But it was so good. It was such a short thing, but it told us everything we need to know about this character.
Like
And
he's a monster.
well, not I know. So I disagree with that. I don't think he's a monster. I
Well,
think
he's a
he's
monster because he was like abused by a monster kind of thing.
yeah, yes. Okay, that's fair. And but I think it's at the end of the day like he wants that belonging, but also that control, right? The thing that he never had.
I think power is more what he's after. Because
Okay.
when he tells Johnny, "Oh yeah, I'll leave my friends." Like that was the test that he failed
Yeah.
because it showed that his priorities were with power, not with loyalty. And like that was the main thing that Tom Hardy was looking for.
Yeah. But I don't know. I guess I read his situation as like him being a victim. You know, like we see him now that he's grown and his parents are old and frail and they're still like that.
Well, yeah,
But I see the
every
kid.
monster was like made into one, but
Yeah, I don't know if that's always true, but probably. But here we see it. We see that that's what he came from,
right.
and the implication is that that's been since he was a little baby, right? And
Which
so
honestly, I felt like that made him more of a dynamic character than Benny.
I agree.
Because we got to see literally one very quick
Yes,
scene.
and I think if Benny had that kind of scene, it would have maybe
It would
given you
have
what
been,
you needed.
I think so.
I think I transposed that
To
because
me, he just looked like, to me, he was just a fool.
mm,
The whole time, I was like, you're just dumb.
he's like it's like a western. He's like a character. You don't see his backstory. He just appears. He just
Yeah,
walks out from the desert, and he's a
true.
mysterious guy, right? Doesn't want nothing from nobody. Isn't gonna take anything from anybody. You know, it's like he's the cowboy, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It just
but
made him boring to me.
he clearly has his own demons. And I think like the movie does give us those glimpses into some of the other characters that as a whole it's saying all of these guys come from something like this, right? So the Michael Shannon character, you know, yeah, he's like a side character, but he tells this like little story at the campfire where he wanted to get drafted into the Vietnam War, but then the guy told him like, no, we're not going to take you because you're undesirable, right? Apparently like the way the thing was written, like it was written to be like lighthearted and funny, but Michael Shannon basically read it and on that one line like landed it in a different tone, and it just like changed. Everyone reacted in like a whoa, like this is what this movie is about. Like we're just a bunch of undesirable people, like cast out from society, cast out from our families, cast out from our, you know, people who are supposed to love us and accept us, you know, saw us as undesirable. And so we found that in each other,
Oh,
right?
I took it the opposite. I thought it meant like he was too much of a undesirable in that he was too rebellious or free-spirited and
Well,
couldn't be tamed for the military.
yes. So
That's how I interpreted it.
no, that's 100% what the person in the story, the sergeant or whatever, the recruiting officer, meant when they said it to him. But I think the way he delivers the line and the way the director films the reactions, cuts to all the shots of everyone being like, "Oh yeah, like I know what that feeling is,"
Huh. Okay.
is what I took as
yeah.
this is what this movie's really about. Like this is what draws these
Oh.
guys together. I don't think it's just about
Interesting.
power
Okay.
or about control, you know? And so it's about that family, which is why when that gets taken away by people who come in for just the power, it's disturbing, you know, because it's ripping away like something that's so deeply meaningful and personal to you. I don't know. It's
That's
just
fair.
there's so many different layers. I thought it was so good. So
Interesting.
yeah, maybe.
Well, I know, like, closing thoughts for me,
Yeah.
I know that I was not the target audience for this movie. Maybe if I had a more vested interest in motorcycle gangs, I would have enjoyed this a lot more. But yeah, as someone who didn't particularly connect with any of the storyline or the characters, it just wasn't for me.
I do think guys will probably like the movie more, but I think because of the narrator being a woman, I would say if you're a woman and any of this sounds interesting, the idea of riding off on a motorcycle in the back of a motorcycle sounds interesting at all, then you might enjoy it too.
Or if you just really like Austin Butler.
Yeah. If you like bad guys taming the untamable.
My word.
All right. Well, that's our review of the Bikeriders.
Yep.
Let us know what you thought if you watched it.
You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Letterboxd, or Apple Podcasts.
And join us next week as we continue our quest for the 5th star.